place where real dialogue matters.
Make some noise for that sound, man.
It is time to take flight with Audio Airstrike.
This is Audio Airstrike, and I'm your host, Everett Hall-McNeill. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 123. The biggest news story, I don't even need to say exactly what it is. I just need to say one word: coronavirus. And this is a special episode because not only am I confined in my home for protection purposes, but I'm also here with a special guest to talk about what we need to know about this virus, and an esteemed gentleman at that. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest at this time is Dr. Christopher Hall. Thank you for joining us, Doctor.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I definitely appreciate you coming on. And one of the biggest reasons why I wanted you on, and I reached out to you through Facebook and talked to your publicist, was there's a lot of people worried, in fear of what's happening, and we want to give the people some information, some viable information on what to do and how to calm down that kind of anxiety and stuff that you need to know. Because as of right now, just to kind of go through the impact of all this, the leagues of the NBA, the NHL, and MLB have postponed several events from now till the summertime. The NFL is considering a couple things in question. I know where I live at, and in my area, they've called a state of emergency. They have shut down bars and restaurants. The only thing that remains open is essential stores for food and stuff of that nature. There's a lot of anxiety because people feel like the quickest sniffle or the loudest cough or even a change in temperature that makes them sweat, they think they might contract coronavirus. It has a lot of people shook and scared, and within good reason. Now, before we get into that, I want you, Dr. Christopher Hall, to kind of give us your story, your background a little bit before we dig into what's going on with coronavirus. So tell them a little bit about yourself.
No problem. And again, thanks for inviting me on your show. I'm very happy to be here. It's an honor. So I've practiced emergency medicine for the last 20 years. I'm currently licensed in a number of states, Alabama and Mississippi. I was a medical doctor and also a captain in the United States Army for 6 years. And one of my jobs there, in fact, was to make sure that our soldiers who were being deployed overseas were up to date insofar as their immunizations and so far as any type of infectious diseases that they would be coming in contact with in foreign countries. And so I have a little bit of background, a little bit of understanding of the type of infectious diseases that our troops have seen across the world. Now I currently work full time in Mississippi. And I've been in that emergency for probably a couple years, but again, my total experience would be 20 years as full time in emergency medicine. And so I'm doing some other things now. There's a national radio show that I host on the Neil Haley Network, where we talk about inspirational stories for young people and kind of highlight my background, the story of my life, which is actually in a book on Amazon called War to the Court. And we may get into that a little bit later or whenever you want me to talk about it. But my main thing is, what I do full time is work in the emergency room and take care of very, very sick people.
Awesome, and we definitely appreciate your service in that regard, because we do need more people like you. We always could use more people like you that can get in there, get on the front line, and help people become better when they're dealing with sickness and stuff of that nature. So we definitely appreciate that. We do not take that for granted at all. Going into the origin of COVID-19, this was found, and I'm looking at the script right now. So for those of you who are watching this and wondering what I'm looking at, I have the script past this screen. COVID-19, the trace could be found back in November 17th, near China. And that is, from what we know, the reported origin of COVID-19. Dr. Christopher Hall, could you go into basically the information that you looked up and talk about how this coronavirus is spread?
Definitely. And again, like you've just mentioned, what we know from the literature is, again, one of the first cases occurred, right, like you said, November, right around November 17th, well, the 17th, I believe.
Yes.
That's not the widely reported case, in the media, but if you look at some of the unpublished studies in China, you'll find that really that is the first origin of it. So it's been known for a little while. Now, let's talk about pretty much this virus and where it comes from, okay? And so this COVID-19, the actual virus is a virus that's found in bats. And so we have to ask ourselves, how does a virus from a bat end up in a human being? Okay. And that will give us a little idea of how the transmission has occurred and where we are now. And so what we find in China is that they have actually live animal markets, okay, where they actually sell animals that are live for food and for eating. And actually, they will take these live animals, okay, and remove the hair from them while they're alive, and actually put them in boiling hot water, okay.
Oh wow!
Yes. This is all over the internet. You can look it up yourself, okay. And actually cook the animal right there and sell the meat, or sometimes just sell the animal live, and that's really what's going to happen to it. Okay, these are not animals who've been immunized. These are not animals who have been again immunized or vaccinated, cared for. These are wild animals. Okay, we also know that the actual bat in China has been used to make bat soup. Okay, and so again, this virus originates in the bats, and so what you can what occurs is that the bat out in the wild actually can bite a mammal, okay, or a wild cat, wild animal. That animal therefore now has the virus, okay, and when that animal is actually sold at the live animal markets in China, and when it's turned into a meal, okay, and eaten, then the virus is actually transmitted to the human at that point. Now, let's talk a little bit about how viruses infect the cell, because again, so far we have the bat to the wild mammal, and the wild mammal turned into food, and now it's ingested. So therefore, the virus is ingested. Now, this particular virus, the COVID-19 virus, actually, like any other viruses, they cannot live pretty much, or rather, they cannot replicate on their own. Viruses just have what are called RNA. Okay, you need DNA to be able to replicate yourself as an organism. Viruses do not have that. So, viruses replicate themselves by pretty much infecting a cell. In our case, human cells that has DNA, and it takes over the machinery of the cell, and it tells the cell, "Look, I'm a virus. I'm taking you over." And you start producing myself, the virus, in large quantities. So now the virus gets into the cell from the surface of the cell. In humans, this particular virus comes to what's called the angiotensin II receptor. The angiotensin II receptor is actually a protein that is on the cells in our lung, and that's how the virus gets into those cells in the lung. Once the virus gets in those cells, then it's caused what you might describe, and I'm going to use a term here, it's called a cytokine storm. What that means is a huge and powerful rapid proliferation of the immune system okay, that comes in and attacks the cell that has the virus in it and is trying to attack the virus. What happens is the immune response is so strong that it destroys the capillaries that are surrounding that cell in the lung, destroys the cell. Therefore, you get what? No exchange of oxygen across that capillary membrane with the cells in the lung. And this is why people have such difficult breathing and respiratory failure. And this is why they get cyanosis or purple around the lips and face when they're infected with this virus in severe cases. And so you have a situation where the immunity that we're supposed to get in people who have weak immune systems, if they have underlying diseases like diabetes, or have COPD, hypertension, anyway they're immunosuppressed, the strong protective part of the immune system won't be able to fight this off. And that's why we see some of these older patients, older than 60, and some of these patients who are immunosuppressed dying in higher numbers if we actually look at the data.
Oh, wow. So that is amazing information, because I don't think a lot of people, because we read one of the symptoms, and one of the symptoms is difficult breathing or heavy breathing, or having like finding it harder to breathe. Like, so just to hear that broken down and understand from a scientific perspective what happens is just fascinating to me. Because I'm looking at this situation, because, you know, there's some young people that, you know, you could be just busy throughout the day and you just tired, but, you know, the heavy breathing can have them anxiety, be like, oh my God, this is one of the symptoms for coronavirus. You know what I mean? So it's like, it could potentially, this is what I was, in terms of what I was talking about earlier, in terms of the anxiety, like the littlest thing has everybody up in arms. So right. I wanted to get into, we got into how it spreads. Now, I kind of want to touch on the ways to prevent the risk of infection. If you could be so kind to go into that.
No problem. I'd be happy to. And so, again, you know, we've had a lot of viruses, you know, in our history. And so far as preventing transmission of the virus and stopping infection, it's really similar to what we've been doing, okay? And that is pretty much washing hands, okay? Cleaning surfaces, any surfaces that we come in contact with on a daily basis in our homes, at the workplace, those surfaces need to be cleaned. And I would say this, as much as possible, okay? If we're around people who are coughing or have fevers, or we ourselves are coughing or have fevers, okay, or severe shortness of breath, then there's a particular distance we need to be apart that the CDC recommends, okay, to not get infected or to give off infection. Number one, we need to wear a mask, okay, because that'll stop the actual droplets from being sent off as a aspirate in the air and contacting other people. So that's what the face mask is about. The actual distance that they recommend is a minimum of 6 feet. So you can tell yourself, hey, 10 feet away is where I need to be. And that will put you clearly from the actual distance. So those are the main things. The main things are we need to try to stay away from large crowds, okay? And I think this is kind of where the national effort is now. This whole idea, which is actually scaring people, this mass quarantining of our population, and also, again, like you said earlier, sir, so far as canceling sporting events of the National Basketball League and NFL. Again, these are things that scare the population. Let me say this. The trials already have begun for the vaccine. There's already been a vaccine that has been synthesized. And today, it was reported that the trials have already started. So I can imagine that this may take probably 2-3 months before they actually have, you know, a true vaccine. They're testing it on people now. As of today, they've started testing people. I think that the media, as in a lot of cases, has kind of scared the population. I mean, we know that the people who are getting sick from this virus, their immune systems are suppressed. That's why we don't see a lot of kids getting the illness.
Right.
Right. Even in China, where we had thousands of disease, did you hear a lot of children being affected? You didn't, because children have strong immune systems. The majority of people that were affected in China, 80%, okay, of the actually people who died from the illness were people who were over 60 years old, and 75% of those people actually had what are called comorbid conditions that put them at risk for dying. Things, again, like diabetes, things like COPD. And keep in mind, particularly in China, a large percent of the males there, 6%, smoke cigarettes, chronic smokers. Okay, so definitely they had COPD.
Oh wow, well that's definitely some enlightening stuff to definitely reduce the risk, because this is something that, and while it doesn't affect millennials, it potentially could. So I even though I know the target of older people that are 60 plus are at high risk, I think it's very important for millennials too to also understand this as well.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of that, I know a lot of millennials are worried and stuff of that nature, and they have room to be, and they are worried for their loved ones and stuff like that. What are the current statistics going on right now for coronavirus as it pertains to nationwide?
Exactly. Very good question. And so there are a couple of sites now that are actually keeping the data, the number. Okay, you've got in the United States, our main source of our infectious disease data and statistics is the Center for Disease Control. Okay, and that number is updated every 24 hours. And the most recent data, last time it was updated, and I'm looking at here, we have the total cases in the United States at 3,487 confirmed cases via testing. And we have to realize that now that the tests have went out to the public health centers in each state, that the numbers are going to go up. Okay. And the total deaths so far are at 68. Now that's, again, from they give out a situation summary. The CDC posts a situation summary every 24 hours, and that is the actual most recent data. What that number breaks down into, what we would like to know really are, the 48. What kind of characteristics? What was their history? Unfortunately, that's not data that they're releasing right now.
Yeah, I think that kind of information will probably be one of those things where it's like time will tell. Because when you talk about the background statistics on the backgrounds of people who were infected, that could, as powerful as that information is, I feel like that they would need more time to really record that data accurately to give the best fair assessment to everybody involved, and so we can get accurate information. Let me ask you this question as it pertains to the media, as it pertains to how everybody has handled this so far. In terms of the media, let's start with the media. I think me and you are in agreement that one of the things that we have noticed is that the media has hyped this up as if that this thing is like the bubonic plague. And I'm not saying we shouldn't take it seriously, because we should. But that doesn't help with the anxiety. Like on this show, I've talked about mental health. On this show, I've talked about anxiety and depression. People that are suffering with that by itself, the last thing that they need to hear is that there is the last thing they need to hear is the media hyping up coronavirus like it's coming after everybody, when statistics are proven kind of otherwise. So I wanted to get your perspective as somebody who, from a different generation, older than me, but also kind of get some insight on as to why the media. It's one thing to inform people, but to scare people is a totally different thing. So I just want to kind of your insight on that.
That's right. So the question is, why would media outlets actually do this? Okay, one thing we know that we know the media actually likes to get a bigger audience. Okay, and sometimes media outlets are in competition with one another, so far as who has the most recent breaking news. Okay, I think that's part of it. That's part of it. And it's hard to say. It's hard to say otherwise. Now, this is the deal. You have to realize that, part of the mainstream media, okay, is this whole, you've got this whole political kind of influence, okay, sometime with the mainstream media, you really do, okay. What we have to realize is that some of the stuff that you and I are talking about, audiences that are listening to us, they're not going to hear this on CNN. They're not going to hear this on Fox News, because, again, we have to realize what country we're talking about, and we have to realize the place of pretty much of China in the world. Okay,
Gotcha.
China is a mass producer of a lot of the most critical drugs, life-saving drugs that are used in the United States. Even some of just the simple things like IV bags and tubing and that kind of stuff is made in China. Okay. And so this is a superpower that you really don't want to offend. And so this is why you won't hear in detail where this virus comes from, which I laid out to you in the beginning of the program, the animal transmission from really inhumane things done to animals that's caused this transmission of virus and caused this new world pandemic. So the media has some political influence that they're trying to get across. And then again, there's competition. But any other reason, again, if you think that you're getting a exciting, scary story, hey, it brings up ratings, it brings up sponsors, this kind of stuff. But the reality of the reality is that the vaccine has already been synthesized. They're already doing trials today. And I think, like I said, my prediction would be probably 2 to 3 months, they'll start vaccinating people. And that's kind of quick and early, but some of the data I looked at today is they put it on a fast track, the actual company that's doing this, because they had basic experience with a similar virus. There's been 2 actually similar viruses like this one. This is not the first one. This SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome, COVID-19, is not the first one. There was also the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, MERS, which was back in, I believe, 2012, which is a very similar virus as coronavirus. And so there was a lot of research done on that. So the broader infectious disease community, they put out the message that this is the first pandemic that we can control.
Right.
And the reason is because we have the advances to do it, and this is not really a new form. It's really, we've had this type of viral pandemics before. Thinking about the swine flu. Again.
Right, I remember that one.
Yes, sir. And the viruses again. There's ways to reduce them. So far as basically what we talked about earlier: washing hands, washing counters, covering our face, and those kind of things. And so I'm particularly not worried. I'll be frank with you. I'm particularly not worried, and I'm certainly going to be in the first line of people, encountering patients that come into the emergency room. Now, if you have those symptoms, we don't suggest that you come to the emergency room. If they're mild, we suggest you stay home. But there are going to be those patients who are going to come in respiratory failure, who are going to be brought in by the ambulance, who are going to have the coronavirus. Those patients are in a severe life-threatening condition, and they're going to have to come to the emergency room via ambulance. They're going to call 911, and they're going to be brought in. And myself, I certainly will be one of the first-line people dealing with these patients. So
that's pretty enlightening, and that's pretty interesting. The fact that even though that you're on the front line, you are not afraid nor worried, because this is something that can be contained at a quicker rate based on what we're seeing, based on the statistics. This is something that can be, and based on the fact that there have been different versions, maybe of not this same name, but other ones as well, that have been quickly put to a halt. It says a lot about advanced technology and what we're able to do when we see this sickness. In terms of the American public, what are some things that you have realized with the American public in terms of their reaction to this? Because I don't think we've ever ran into, at least in America, I'll say strictly America because that's where I can't speak for any other country.
Exactly.
The only reason why I'm saying that because that's where I'm from. What do you say to how America has reacted? What are some jewels? What are some life lessons that you've noticed based on the behavior? Everybody runs to the stores empty. Toilet paper is gone. Bread is gone. Essentials mostly are gone. What are some of the things that you have noticed, or any, food for thought about people's behavior during this time?
Exactly. And great question. And again, I think that we're kind of, and I would describe this as the American public, unfortunately, is in a state of panic. And some of this panic occurred because how the information, the warning, was disseminated to the American public. We talked about how many people were dying in the different foreign countries, but no one ever categorized the actual category of the people who were dying. Again, over 60, immunosuppressed, and we know, particularly in Wuhan, China, where they had some of the data showed that there were, at one point, if you're looking at the data, they had 76,000 confirmed cases, laboratory tested cases of people with the COVID-19 infection. Of that number, there were 67,000 people who recovered. 67,000 that recovered, and I'm not saying that other people died, the difference, but that's the actual number they said that had recovered, which you can see is pretty large number. The other thing is there is data where we have even people of extreme age, as high as age 94, recovering from this COVID-19 infection, and then infections in infants where they've recovered. Okay, so I think we certainly need more time to fully characterize the disease and fully characterize the population that's fully at risk. But I said early on that, this is something that that it's not, like you said, it's not any type of death sentence. It's certainly not the plague, like you said. Again, a lot of this is due to media hype, and you actually had some very noted television physicians who said the exact same thing early on. Okay, Dr. Oz was one of them who said very early on that this is really being, overblown.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I see he's changing his story more recently, and I'm not sure who's got a hold of him, but either way, I don't want the American public to think that this is some type of death sentence. And it's certainly not. It's not the plague, and it's something that we have the scientific knowledge and skill to treat, and certainly to prevent in the future via vaccinations. Okay, and even now we have more knowledge of what's called immunotherapy, where those patients who are extremely sick, who end up in the ICU. Again, we're talking about the immunosuppressed population who end up on ventilators. Okay, where you will, some of the treatments are things like IV steroids, IV antibiotics for secondary bacterial infections, and then IV immunotherapy, okay, which is something that's going to be needed for the more severely sick patients. So there's a map, there's a plan, and the fact is that the majority of us will never end up in that situation, being severely sick, from this virus. So.
I mean, well, that's very hopeful, and that's very promising, and I definitely appreciate you for saying that, because a lot of people are struggling to grasp the realistic aura of what is going on, due to, because everybody gets their information from certain sources. So if the sources are scheming to scare you half to death, to the point you ended up fighting over toilet paper, that says a lot about the source.
Yeah, that's great. That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's very enlightening and kind of scary at the same time, because it's like, all right, you literally coerce these people in fear, and so that's something that I'm glad that you're here with me to kind of go over this information, because it's very important. That's why I kind of just spitballed questions around and kind of just let you speak, because this is one of the, like, I'm 29, I'm gonna be 30 this year, so to see, I've never ran into something like this before. I've never seen something like this before in my lifetime. So to get text messages of people whose jobs are being affected, because I come from the art side of stuff, so when you're freelancing, it's definitely a big difference. To see people, especially millennials, growing very, very concerned over, it's like, hey, they're closing down my job because of this, and I don't know where the income's going to come through, and certain things are shutting down. Like, how's my livelihood going to be? Okay, now I got to replan and stuff of that nature. I have another question. This question was not on our script.
Yeah, sure.
What are some advice that you could give to young people who are scared of their job security, whether it be, their job closes down for a certain amount of time, or money ends up being funny in certain regards? What are some precautions that people can take to kind of like, stay stable and kind of like get around a lot of the potential problems? What are some suggestions based on what you've seen?
Exactly. Yeah. And so, again, the whole idea of they're closing down the jobs and having this temporary cease of really mass aggregation of public again, it's to stop the spread, the actual spread, you know. And so it makes sense. That's reasonable, okay, that you want to stop the spread. The problem is that most of the people you're sending home are not immunosuppressed, and they are young, like you said, the millennium, and so they're really at very low risk of getting any serious illness from this disease. So what I would suggest is, and this is what I really think they should do. Okay, they need to talk to, and I'm hoping that whoever their authority is, whoever their employer is, whoever the boss or manager, they need to ask that person directly. Okay, I'm being essentially unemployed, not of my doing. Okay, by higher forces, and what's the security that how I will receive some kind of compensation for this? Now, the Trump administration, apparently, what I understand is that they were on TV recently saying that people are going to be sent home and that there'll be some type of, compensation from the government for this. I don't know the details of that, but I would directly ask my chain of command or my employer, how am I supposed to buy food? How am I supposed to feed my kids? Okay, I mean, do you have any kind of guarantee you can give us before we're leaving here? If not, can you go up the chain? You're the manager, you're the boss. Can you call corporate? Can you talk to corporate and see how are we going to be compensated for this? Because we don't want to just be laid off, told to go home for 2 or 3 weeks. We have no, some of us don't have money saved up. Now, so in that case, again, you'd have to look at, if you don't have, so that's the first thing you want to do. Try to get some type of assurance from the higher ups. Then after that, since this is coming, that might be a reasonable reason to go and start, buying food, because the fact is you may not have any money or another check in the next couple of weeks to do that. So whatever you have now, start buying the food, start saving it for that reason. And so those are some of the things, and again, the other thing you can always do is people at their jobs. Okay. And then sometimes when you're at your job, you have to come together as a family. Okay. This is going to affect all you guys, and you just network one another to see who has what. Really, this is a time where you want to try to help one another. Sometimes people have more resources saved up than the next guy, and you can help someone in this need. That's what we need to do as a nation, to come together. But let me say one other thing about this whole idea of people buying toilet paper. Okay, the deal with that, this particular virus, okay, causes almost no diarrhea. That's one of the of all the data they've collected. Okay, it affects the respiratory system the most. Okay, and there are some severe symptoms that you should be worried about if you get the severe respiratory symptoms. Let me say what those are really quickly. Burning in the chest, fever, and then severe shortness of breath, and then what I would describe as severe lethargy or kind of altered mental status, confusion. Okay. And again, we talked about how the shortness of breath occurs. We talked about how the virus infects those cells in the lung. We talked about how the immune system comes in with this massive response to this foreign thing, this virus, trying to destroy the virus, but your immune system ends up destroying your own cells as well when it does that. And that's why you get breakdown of the actual capillaries that line the terminal sacs of the lung, the alveoli, the capillary line here. The capillaries are destroyed, the alveoli are destroyed. There's no oxygen exchange between the blood and the lung. Therefore, the patient gets severely short of breath. There's no oxygen that's delivered to the organs. Okay, so you get organ failure because once you have no exchange for the oxygen coming to your lungs, it can't get into the capillaries. The the oxygen can't be taken to your kidney, to your heart, to your brain. Okay, and so that's how those things happen. But so that's why some of the more severe signs, okay, are burning in the chest, the severe shortness of breath, and then what we describe as cyanosis, which would either be the kind of the blue tinging of the lips, and then in more lighter complected people, the bluing of the face. Mucous membrane, okay, and darker complected people like myself, and lips with more of the cyanosis you're looking for. So those are severe symptoms that you should definitely be, on the phone, talking to or a doctor about as to what to do.
That's awesome. I definitely appreciate all the information you've given out. Let's go into your book. You mentioned your book earlier that you had out. I want to give you a chance to plug that because you've laid out a lot of good, not only good resources, but also just good information on how to combat this virus and how to protect yourself, and also how to protect yourself not just from the virus, but also to survive and plan ahead and maintain. You've given all that. You lay that all down. I wanted you to plug your book and talk about how this could help people that are listening to this podcast right now, and how that could be beneficial towards their life. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yes, sir. Wow. You know what? I like I said, I'm so excited to be on your show. And I'm so happy that you're bringing this message forward, okay, to the people in the community, so they know the truth of what's going on. So, sure, changing gears, talking a little bit about myself. Again, I wrote a book back in 2018, March 2018, that's called Ward of the Court. And it's on Amazon. And so you can go to Amazon, you can type my name in, type in Word of the Court, or you can actually go just to Google and type in Christopher L. Hall, MD, and this book will come up, and a lot of stuff about myself will come up, I'm sure. But I wrote this book because I was a ward of the court, okay? At the age of 4, I was put in foster homes. My family and I, we were... my parents moved from Louisiana, and we were living in the Nickerson Garden projects there in Los Angeles, California, in Watts. And my dad got in a situation where he was put in prison. He ended up getting in a situation with another individual, and the other individual ended up dead. And so my dad was incarcerated for murder. And at that time, there was 5 of us living with our mother, who was she's very, very young at the time, and certainly had some challenges back then, but ended up out and leaving us at home for a number of days. And so social services came in and put us in foster homes. And so at the age of 4, I went to my first foster home in the rain, barefoot, and it was Miss Hankins. She was a very nice lady, but that's how this journey started. And so from there, I think by the time I was 12, I probably had been in at least 3 or 4 different boys' homes. And, you get in the boys' home situation, and, you're influenced by those other boys there. You get in trouble. And so I was a bad kid and ended up in juvenile hall, every juvenile hall in Los Angeles, South Central, Riverside, Orange County. And but at some point, I think when I was about 14, and this is all detailed in the book here, Word of the Court, it talks about how my life was changed around, how my brother went off to prison, and he's there now. He has 1,300 years. He's not getting out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was under that he was a 7-time felon, and he had the 3 strikes there in California, and it was a little bit of political stuff involved. With Arnold Schwarzenegger was the government there, and he was trying to make a statement. And so Wayne ended up being what you might call the Willie Horton of that whole campaign. But he's in there now, but he's written a chapter in this book, Ward of the Court. And his chapter is talking about how he ended up where he is. And I talk about my chapter is how I ended up where I am. And so you get a contrast of different lives of young black men in the black community and what we face and what we go through. But I would recommend that you read his chapter. He's talking very pointed about very serious things about his life on the street, about how he ended up in drugs, how he ended up serving 1,300 years. And so, and then in my chapter, I'll talk about my experience in the boys' homes and the foster homes. How did I end up in becoming a doctor? How did I end up in medical school? And then I actually went to dental school. I went to graduate school. Again, as I said early on, I served as a captain in the Army and as a doctor in the Army. So that's what this book's about. It's a motivational book for young people. And I really wrote the book about 10 years ago, and it's been sitting around. And I decided in 2018 that I really want to touch the hearts and minds of our young black men in our community, and show them that, that there's a way, that it's not all what you're given in life. You don't always have to say, because I come from a poor background or because I come from the projects or Watts, I'm going to end up in a certain situation. And that's what this book is about. And so, and again, that's why I'm so excited to be on your show, because I know that you bring out, and talk about those things in the community that, can help our young people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important to enlighten young minds. I think it's very important to also get perspective from older generations and kind of bridge that gap. You know what I'm saying? Because there is so many, jewels that that the elders have, and sometimes through miscommunication and stuff of that nature, sometimes those conversations between generations get lost and people don't take advantage of those times. So one of the reasons why I started this show was to kind of, help be that bridge and kind of open up that own dialogue. Here we are, two different generations, but having a conversation over stuff that's important to us. And I think that speaks a lot. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's very important that people see this, people feel this, do what they need to do to, get the help that they need and get the resources, but also be enlightened and inspired. And I think that's very, very important.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Well, we will definitely plug your book. The link will be in the description of this episode for people to download and for people to get a hold of, and also be able to purchase your book. So I will look that up and I will send the link to I'll put the link in the description and to make sure that people get to your book. Definitely a must read based off what I'm hearing, and I'm gonna pick one up myself.
Yes, sir. No problem. And like I said, I think the book is probably $4 or $5. And the fact is this: I can send you some books too. You don't have to necessarily, you don't have to buy one. I'll send you one for sure. But I can send some for people who need them. So. Okay,
absolutely, man. I would love to take a copy of your book. Make sure you sign it for me.
I will definitely do that. Definitely, no doubt.
Yeah, well, first off, I want to thank you for coming on Audio Airstrike and basically helping clear all the hype, all of the scare tactics, all of the a lot of the fear mongering that goes on. Yes, this is something to take very seriously, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we will get through this together. So is there any last parting words that you want to, any jewels you want to drop, anything you want to speak on, before we close this episode?
Well, really, this right here is kind of is my message to our young people here in America. Okay. And particularly to our young black males out here in America, because I represent them. Okay, if you actually read the book, you'll see that I'm that kid who is not doing very well in school. I'm the kid who's not making the high grades in high school. Okay, I'm the kid who doesn't have the best test taking skills on the standardized tests. You'll see that that's actually me. Okay, but you'll see that if they read in this book my actual life story, there's some pearls in there that when you come to that path in the road, we have to make that decision between right and wrong, and all possibilities are there, that it could help you make the right decision. Okay. And so, again, I'm very honored to be on your show and to have an opportunity to speak to your audience about the coronavirus and about this book. So, yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We definitely appreciate it. And you're more than welcome to come back. More than welcome to come back.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it can be, more fun topics, and less serious, scary topics like we thought this would be today. Definitely.
Yeah. Definitely, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely more fun topics after this. So with that being said, this is another edition of Audio Airstrike, guys. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Thank you for tuning in every week, whether it's YouTube, whether it's SoundCloud, whether it's iTunes. We definitely appreciate it. I wanted to do something to enlighten people. No fear mongering, just the straight truth. And I want to thank Dr. Christopher Hall for coming through and making sure and helping me and assisting me to make sure that truth is captured. With that being said, this has been another edition. Until next, everybody, we will check you later.